Okay, so I just want to talk you through lesson 4, just in case you were in the assembly the other day, or if you were out, so that you are all caught up with lesson 4. So we have a couple vocabulary words to add to your notes. There are surveys, experiments, and observational studies, which are 3 ways that we collect data. Surveys, most of you know what a survey is. You've had one, you've taken one. The other day you gave one on the eclipse. So it's verbal, written, online, etc. We use it to give to a sample that's collected at random that helps us to represent the population and helps us to obtain data. An experiment is different because we impose a treatment or a change of some sort onto a group of people or groups of people or animals or whatever our group might be. But the big thing is that you impose a treatment. You make them change their behavior in some way. And we're able to conclude some cause and effect relationships between these 2 or more variables after we've imposed those treatments. And we definitely try to randomly assign them to their groups to make sure that we can have some valid conclusions. The third type is observational studies. This is when a researcher collects information, so it's things that have usually already happened, and they're just asking about those things. Like a lot of times we research how pregnant women's diet affects their babies and things like that. We research about foods that we eat and how it affects the rate of diabetes and things like that. Notice randomization is not necessary since conclusions in this case are only speculative. We are not making any sort of definite statements. We're just kind of looking at the relationship between behaviors sometimes to see if there's a connection. So let's look at your examples from that day in case you missed them. If you've already seen these, you're welcome to fast forward to the next part where I go over the homework. So for these 3 examples, we were just looking at experiment versus observational study. Let me cover up this part so it's not too much to look at. An experiment was the first one because 50 people with clinical depression were divided into 2 groups. Over a 6-month period, one group was given a traditional treatment for depression and the other group was given a new drug. And then the people were evaluated at the end of the period to determine whether their depression had improved. So this is definitely an experiment because we had imposed treatments on these groups of people. Number 2 asks, to determine whether or not apples really do keep the doctor away, 40 patients at a doctor's office were asked to report how often they came to the doctor and the number of apples they had eaten recently. So these were behaviors they had already performed or done, like we had not changed their behavior. So this is an observational study. We are gathering information about prior behavior or actions. Number 3 says, to determine whether music really helps student scores on a test, a teacher who taught 2 U.S. history classes played classical music during testing for one class and played no music for testing during the other class. So she performed or he performed an experiment because they imposed a treatment on the students by playing the music. So the next part, we need to add some more vocabulary to our notes. Bias is an important word to put in our notes. That is the tendency of a survey's results to overestimate or underestimate the true value of what you're trying to find. And then the 2 main types that we look at are selection bias, which means that there was some sort of bias in how we select our sample. And then response bias is the tendency of a person to answer questions on a survey untruthfully or misleadingly. So let's look at some examples of those 2 things. Add those to your notes. From a class containing 12 girls and 10 boys, 3 students are to be selected to serve on a school advisory panel. Here are 4 different methods of making the selection. So out of these methods, we want to choose which one is the best way to represent the panel. So this first one was just selecting the first 3 names on the class roll. So that is definitely not random and not the best way. Number 2 is another example of not random, just selecting the first 3 students who volunteer. Those students would most likely be the same personality type. They would be extroverted, they would be outgoing, and we want a variety of students to serve on the panel. Next, we could place the names of the 22 students in a hat, mix them thoroughly, and select 3 names from the mix. This is definitely the best way so far because it's nice and random. Put them in a hat, draw them out. There's nothing that would affect those results of choosing those 3 students. And number 4, select the first 3 students who show up for class tomorrow. Again, this is not random. Usually the first 3 students typically show up to class early, and they are similar personality types, most likely. Okay, so let's look down here at some of the response bias examples. Let me move the paper up a little bit. So response bias, again, was the tendency of a person to answer questions on a survey untruthfully or misleadingly. So it might be that the way it was worded affects their response. So these 2 examples help to look at that. Tell whether the question is potentially biased and explain your answer. And if the question is potentially biased, rewrite it so that it is not. So the first one was, don't you agree that the voting age should be lowered to 16 because many 16-year-olds are responsible and informed? Well, this is biased because of the persuasive language of don't you agree, and also saying that 16-year-olds are responsible and informed, which is an opinion. So it could be rewritten as simply, do you think the voting age should be lowered to 16? And then leave it at that. Do you want to eat a hamburger or the usual vegetable sandwich? So the usual part there tries to persuade someone to choose their vegetable sandwich, since that might be the easier choice for the waiter or waitress to remember when they're placing the order. So that one was biased for that reason. We could just take out the phrase the usual and say, do you want to eat a hamburger or vegetable sandwich? So let's see. We had, I think this one, I think I was going in order. Let's see. Yeah, this is the right order. Okay, so how would a fast food franchise owner have used a survey to find out about employer-employee relations present response bias? So this one would be hard because an employee would not want to report anything about their employer that would be negative, so their responses would most likely just be positive results. So that's what would happen with that one. I just didn't write that one down. And then it wants us to randomly assign treatments and experiments. So using our ADS acronym, but change the S to select the amount to go into first treatment group, and then the remaining will go into another treatment group. This year, the high school has enough money to compare the online SAT course with traditional classroom instruction. 20 students have agreed to participate in an experiment comparing the 2 instructional methods. So we want to describe, using our table of random digits, how to allocate the subjects into the 2 treatment groups, which are students. So first we would number the subjects 01 to 20. Always make sure they have the same number of digits. Using the table of random digits, starting at line 1, and you can start wherever you want, choose 2-digit numbers until you have selected 10 numbers between 0, 1, and 20. Skip 0, 0, repeats, and any number greater than 20, and continue this procedure to pick 10 more. Assign the first 10 students chosen to online instruction and assign the second group of 10 to the traditional instruction. So you don't have to have it word for word what I have, but things you have to include are how to number the subjects with an equal number of digits. You should always put what line to start on. You should always list how many digits you're going to choose at a time. You should also list how many are selected and what you have to throw out or skip. And then for these, you also have to state that you're going to assign them either the first 10 students to the first group and the second 10 students to the second group, or you could even do it differently, like every other student gets assigned to one or the other group. You just have to be explicit when you explain it. Okay, so on the homework part, we were choosing, again, experiment, observational study, and those are the only 2 for these first few examples. In an attempt to determine if students prefer bottled water to tap water, you set up a table in the cafeteria at lunchtime and have students sample some of each and ask them which they prefer. So since we are imposing a treatment on people by having them actually taste water and compare it, that is an experiment. Researchers collect data over 15 years about 100 sets of identical twins to see how their personalities develop similar or different characteristics. So this one is just gathering data on stuff that has already occurred. And so that would just be observational study. Cloned mice are put into different colored cage environments to see if there is an effect on their temperaments. That's an experiment. Since the environments are changing, there is a treatment being imposed on the mice. Researchers find that babies who were exposed to lead paint have a high risk of brain damage. That one is just going back to find like something that has already happened, unfortunately. So that is an observational study. Number 2 says describe how selection bias is or is not present in the following scenarios. So the first one is, what is your favorite sport? But the sample is chosen from people attending a soccer game. So that one is definitely biased in how they chose their sample because people at soccer games tend to favor soccer over other sports. The second part is, what is your favorite sport drink? Sample was chosen out of names from a phone book. So that one would be considered randomly chosen and is not biased. The part C says, should more money be put into athletic programs or music programs at school? And the sample is chosen from students in the band program. So that one would certainly be biased because students in the band program will tend to favor the music programs over the athletic programs, most likely. Now it says, identify how response bias is or is not present in each of the following scenarios. So these last few examples are here on this last page. So students are asked by their teacher whether they had ever cheated on a test. So students who cheat will be likely to lie to their teacher if asked that question because they want to maintain a good impression with their teacher. And then one says, a survey asked the question, are you in favor of holding the Olympics in Toronto even though your taxes may increase? So stating that taxes may increase would sway people to not favor hosting the Olympics. So that one is certainly biased. Or that's how those two would cause bias in people's responses. And the last one was to describe again how to treat these, or how to assign the rats to the 3 treatment groups using your table of random digits. So I just saw that there were 21 rats that we need to choose. So assuming they're all sitting in cages and they have to go through a treatment, I would assign each rat a number 0, 1 to 21. Using the table of random digits starting at line 5, and I just picked a random line, choose 7 2-digit numbers. Skip 0, 0, repeats, and any number greater than 21. Assign these 7 rats to treatment 1, black tea. Continue choosing 7 more 2-digit numbers and assign these rats to treatment 2, green tea. And the remaining 7 rats, 0, 1 to 21, that have not yet been selected will be assigned treatment 3, placebo. So I hope that helps. I will do lesson 5 in another video because this one is taking a long time.